Hey everyone, it's Dr. Jen here. Good afternoon. Nice to see you all. And today it's What's Up Wednesday with Ask Dr. Jen. That's me, board certified pediatrician and parenting expert. And I know that becoming a parent is one of the most joyous occasions, yet at the same time can be so overwhelming for new parents, right? All of a sudden you have this realization that, oh my, I really have to take care of this baby 24/7, this bundle of joy. And parents can be paralyzed with fear sometimes about making a mistake. And there's so much anxiety and stress over that. So that's really why I created Pediatrician in Your Pocket, the only comprehensive video guide to really help new parents with everything that they need to know from A to P, P-E-E, right? We know that babies do that a lot. So it's bite-sized 5-minute videos that you can watch all about everything you need to know. But today I thought maybe I'd just go over a couple of those questions that new parents have and ask often, so you can have the answers right away. So let me give you a couple of things that I hear all the time from new parents. So starting with, they bring the baby home and they really want to know, how do I know if my baby is eating enough or getting enough? And usually it's referring to breast milk because, right, it's really hard to know. There's no ounces to know when you're breastfeeding a baby. So what's important to know is that babies in general lose about 10% of their weight at the beginning, and that's normal. They lose a little bit and then they start to gain it back. They usually gain their weight back by 2 weeks of age, but you want to then be usually day 3 or 4 start to see them plateauing and then increasing in weight, which is usually about ½ an ounce to an ounce a day, which is about ½ a pound a week at the beginning. And in general, babies usually double their birth weight by 4 months, and by a year, they triple their birth weight. So that's a lot of growing, right, and feeding and growing within the first year of life. So how do you know that your baby is getting enough? So probably at the beginning, if you're breastfeeding, one of the most important things is that your baby is having lots of wet diapers, right? So what goes in must come out. So if they're very hydrated and they're doing well and they're feeding well, they're going to be having wet diapers. So about 4 to 6 wet diapers, which is every few hours, means that your baby is doing really well and taking a lot in. And also they'll be having poop diapers too, right? So that could be even more variable, but usually at the beginning they're having about 2 or so a day, maybe more, and sometimes even less. But I often tell patients to go by the wet diapers because that's really actually can give us much more information. Also, if you're breastfeeding, you want to breastfeed at least every 2 to 3 hours. And when you're calculating breastfeeding, it's from when you start and then when you go to the next feed again. So it's from the beginning to the beginning, and that's usually every 2 to 3 hours, especially when you want to get your milk going. And usually feed 20 to 30 minutes on each side. And usually if you're doing that, that's a great way to see and feel confident that your baby is getting enough. How else can you tell? So if your baby is latching on well and is feeding well, they should be pretty content in between feeds. And as you see as they get older, you'll see that their faces will fill out a little bit, and then their body as well too. So you'll sort of be able to tell. But at the beginning, I know it could be super difficult. One of the most important things is to make sure to bring your baby to their baby checkups or their preventative visits, particularly at the beginning, because this is what we do as pediatricians, right? We weigh the babies, we take their vitals, we examine them, we take a good history and really check out, make sure the baby is gaining adequate weight, because that's really one of the most important things for their growth and development. We measure their head circumferences, their weight, their lengths, so it's really, really important to go to all those visits. If you have questions or concerns before or in between, again, speak with your pediatrician. They may want to see you again for a weight check just to make sure everything is going as planned. So moving on, another question that I get very frequently is what's considered a fever in a baby and when should I worry? And this is really, really important. So in a baby, particularly for those under 3 months and newborns, 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit is considered a fever, which is also 38 degrees Celsius for people using Celsius. So 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit. And do you need to take the temperature every single day of your baby? No, you do not. You should take it if the baby seems really warm to you. The first thing I usually tell parents though is to undress the baby. We often tend to overbundle babies and that can actually raise their temperature a bit. So undress the baby, let them lay down, relax for a few minutes, and then take the temperature if need be. And again, take the temperature if they're cranky and they're fever, if they feel warm to you, if they're fussy, if they're not feeding well, they're coughing, very irritable, anything like that, take their temperature, particularly if they're young, less than 3 months of age. It's important. So if a baby does have a temperature of greater than 100.4, and that's a rectal temperature, so that's the most accurate, still the gold standard, particularly in babies, because sometimes it could be, other methods can be very inaccurate. If you do take it and you're concerned, you need to speak and then see the pediatrician. It's important. Babies, their immune system is still developing, and if they have an infection, it can spread quicker through the bloodstream, and so it's really important to be checked out. Usually, if a baby has a fever, further testing needs to be done, and that's sort of at the discretion at your pediatrician. So make sure if your baby does have that fever, 100.4, that you do then have a visit with your pediatrician, or if the baby seems very sick and you can't get through, obviously that warrants a visit to the emergency room if necessary. So that's when to worry if you do have a fever in young babies. So moving on, the next question that I get asked a lot is, oh, this is a great question. So many parents come and say, I love my baby, I love holding my baby, it's so cuddly and soft, yet my mother-in-law keeps telling me if I hold the baby, I'm going to spoil the baby. Is that going to be a problem, Dr. Jen? So my answer, you cannot spoil a newborn baby. I think that's why they're like made this way, right? They're so cute, they're so cuddly, they smell so good, so we'll hold them, right? It's important that skin-to-skin contact is really, really important. Holding your baby, they actually don't have, they have actually very strong reflexes, baby newborn reflexes, that they startle and that they want to be held, that they can't soothe themselves. They have a sucking reflex. So all this actually tends to start to decrease after 3 months or so. But at the beginning, they really need you to help them soothe. They can't soothe themselves. So you can swaddle, we can hold them. As I said, skin-to-skin contact, talking to them, singing to them, all so important. You are not going to build any bad habits within the first few months. Crying as well too. So don't feel that pressure from anyone. Hear it from me, Dr. Jen, you cannot spoil your newborn. You can hold them, play with them as much as possible. But just to say on the flip side too, if your baby is fine and is quiet, you don't need to be holding them 24/7. You can put them down, right, in a cradle or in a safe place in their bassinet or their crib. This way, if you want to do something or even take a rest yourself, it's totally fine too. But it's sort of that balance. So if you want to hold the baby and cuddle the baby, it's great to do. Babies respond to your voice, your sound, your singing. So go ahead and hold that baby as much as you want. So on that same theme of holding babies a lot, I get asked, can I take my baby out or do I need to wait till they've had their first set of immunizations or shots? And you know, we all live in different climates, right? Even right now, it's very cold here in New York, and there's snow in some places, but other places it's really, really warm. And so it is okay to take your baby out right away. Once you feel up to it, it's great to go for a walk with the baby. You can push the baby in the stroller, or you can wear them and walk around with the baby as well too. What you don't want to do is go to any crowded stores and restaurants or enclosed places. That's sort of where we get germs, right? Being outside, the weather doesn't cause germs, but it's people who have germs that can be passed, so sneezing and coughing, any public places like that too. So you really want to make sure that you avoid that. But if you want to take a nice walk around the block or go outside to the park, just make sure that nobody else is touching your baby. People like to go, oh, your baby's so cute, let me see. And it's okay not to let strangers or anyone, because again, you don't know their medical history, or if they've had a cold or they're getting over a cold. So you really want to make sure that if you do go out, that you're just going for a walk, getting some fresh air. It's good for you and the baby. So you can do that right away as soon as you feel up to it. It's a great way for your mood and for the baby as well too. Another question I get, particularly having to do with breastfeeding, is can I have a glass of wine or a drink if I'm breastfeeding? And that's really a great question because parents get often really confused with this. So yes, it is actually okay to have a glass of wine or have a drink while you're breastfeeding. But what to remember and to consider is that it takes about 3 hours or so for an ounce, which is probably like a glass of wine, or if you have a beer or one mixed drink, for it to be metabolized. So you want to make sure that if you feed the baby, breastfeed the baby, and you have a nice leisurely drink, and then if you wait 3 or so hours until your next feeding, it's totally fine then to breastfeed your baby. So you do not need to, what people refer to as pump and dump the breast milk, right? And you feel like you're wasting this liquid gold. So if you just have a nice one relaxing drink and that's what you want to have, you can plan it right after you've fed the baby. By the next feeding, it's okay again. So just remember, in moderation is really what's important. Again, take into factors into consideration. If you have something to eat with it, it's also slower to be absorbed. And again, if your baby is a preemie or a very young newborn, you may want to wait too, because also, again, young babies don't metabolize as quickly, especially if they're premature. Their livers that are filtering, metabolizing are much slower, and because they are immature, so you want to wait even longer. But for babies who are older than 3 months of age, there's no problem at all if you're going to have a drink, and you don't need to throw it out and pump and throw it out. So I hope that was helpful to a lot of moms out there who are breastfeeding, to give you a little break and relaxation if that's the way you want to do it. So another question I get often is, should I give my baby a pacifier? So the answer to that question is if they want it. So there's no real answer. Some babies like pacifiers, some babies don't like pacifiers. But what you need to remember is, as I said at the beginning, is that babies have this natural reflex to suck. So they like to suck often, and it's what we call non-nutritive, which means that they may not even be hungry, that they just like to suck. And that's usually within the first couple of months of life, and then that also starts to decrease. They really are only sucking when they want to eat. So at the beginning, they may want a pacifier much more frequently. If they're crying, you may want to give a pacifier to help relax them so that they can go to sleep. You can't force it. You can try different pacifiers. If they don't like it, then obviously your baby's not going to be using a pacifier. One thing that I do recommend is that as that reflex starts to decrease, is to also decrease the use of pacifier as well too. Only because then it gets so hard. If your baby is using it all the time and you're always popping it into their mouth, then every time it falls out at night when they're sleeping, then it gets very difficult because you have to keep going back in the middle of the night to put it back in to get them to soothe to go to sleep. So it's better that if they use it to go to sleep, once they fall asleep or drowsy, take it out of their mouth. And that's what I recommend. If it falls out, to also just to leave it out. But if you keep popping it back in, even when they don't seem to need it, then you're going to have this vicious cycle, and it's going to be more difficult down the road. Is it impossible to get rid of later on? No, but I'm just going to warn you now, it can be a little bit more challenging or difficult. So those would be my recommendations. As I said, each baby is different, and so if you have more questions about that, obviously consult your pediatrician as well too. And the last question I want to touch on is, I get this a lot, when will my baby sleep through the night? And that's sort of a loaded question. It depends on the age of your baby and what you consider through the night. So, for example, a newborn baby, it needs to eat frequently, as I said, especially breastfed babies at the beginning, every 2-3 hours. They're eating very frequently. By 2 months of age, though, you're hoping what we call through the night is actually really, a 5-hour stretch. That's pretty amazing. So parents are really relieved when I say that, because they say, well, my friend had a baby that slept through the night. Well, most babies do not at 2 months sleep through the night. They need to eat. Their stomachs are still small, and they really need to eat and get that nourishment to grow. But usually then by the time that they are, I would say, 4 months of age or so, babies in general throughout the day are sleeping about 15 hours, but that's including their naps as well, which could be 2 or even 3 times a day. So at that point, they may be having a very long stretch, which can be like 8 hours, which is amazing. And I had this the other day. Mom said, well, my baby's waking up in the middle of the night. And then when I took a really good history, and she said her friend's baby sleeps all through the night, and she's so jealous, and it's so hard, and, she wants to start sleep training. And when I took this history, I saw that her baby was sleeping 8 hours a day, as was actually her friend's baby. But when your baby is sleeping like 10 p.m. to 6, then you feel like your baby is sleeping all night long. And this mom, she said, the baby went to sleep 6:37, was getting up at 2:33, feeding, and then going back to sleep till about 6. So she was concerned with that middle of the night feed. And I said, at this point, this is just starting, right? So you're getting this amazing 8-hour stretch. It's just how you think about it, because it's earlier in the evening. And again, if you give it some time, it usually actually can work its way out on its own. Give the baby some time. It's for them to do this. And if not, yes, after 4 months, it is fine to start. There's many different things called sleep training or sleep learning, but probably the most key element to that before even doing that is having a good nighttime routine. Making sure that your baby during the day is fed with the lights on and it's awake and alert. At night, you keep it quiet and dark. You have a nice bedtime routine can be helpful, and really getting your baby to start at 3 to 4 months to fall asleep on their own without a lot of rocking and holding, because you want baby to be able to then start to soothe themselves because they do have the ability to do that at that age. It's just starting to take effect. So you really want to get them down to settle a little bit on their own while they're a little bit drowsy and not totally asleep in your arms, because then they're always going to want you to hold them to get them back to sleep. So those would be my tips to starting. Don't get too obsessed with the sleep and too stressed. I'm going to tell you something that I read, that the science shows that probably about 75% of babies by age 1 ends up, no matter what you did or if you did nothing at all, ends up sleeping through the night. So give it some time. I'm not saying you have to wait till age 1, but with all these methods, a lot of it is the physiologic aspects of the baby. When they start to be much more ready, between 4 to 6 months, each baby is different. You'll be able, if you have a good nighttime routine and habits, be able to help them sleep through the night, so both you and baby get a lot of rest. So I hope that was helpful. Those are probably the top questions that I get for newborns. If you have other questions, feel free to send them my way. I will answer them for you. It's Dr. Jen, and have a great day.